This meeting has been led.
Need to make sure I have the details pulled up of the CBA. So when we get to that.
All right.
All right. I think I'm good.
Okay.
All right.
We are live. Okay. Welcome in, everybody. This is a live stream we had planned to talk about the NFL a little bit, have some golf discussion with the Players Championship, and talk about the breaking news that just went down today, NFL trades, MLB and their new, what was the word they used for it? Tentative CBA that they agreed to for this season. We'll get into all that. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy.
The first thing I want to say, and welcome back, everybody, if you're watching this. What did we do while we were recording our episode 99 on Monday that made the sports gods go crazy?
Yeah.
What happened? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know.
It seems now we're on the track where we're getting. I mean, I know that the NFL free agency period officially opens next week on like the 16th. However, it seems ever since Tuesday, ever since Aaron Rodgers announced he was returning to the Green Bay Packers, it seems every day we're getting a blockbuster trade. Tuesday, it was Russell Wilson to the Broncos. Yesterday, it was Carson Wentz to Washington. Today, we just got news that Khalil Mack is going to the Chargers. It seems every single day now we're getting a major trade going down in the NFL. But that's aside the point. The point is, wow, the sports world is blowing up. I mean, I can't get enough of Twitter right now. But with that being said, let's just go ahead and premiere our golf segment for the 2022 PGA Tour season. And we'll start at the Players Championship, which kicked off today. But let's be clear about what we're going to do on this segment.
Right. So what's basically is going to happen is me and Michael have selected 5 players this week, varying in odds to win, basically. Going down the list, the lower the odds that they have to win based on Vegas projections. We made our picks last night and we sent them to each other just so that we didn't have any weird business going on with our picks being made during the tournament or anything like that. So what's going to happen is we're going to combine our 5 pick scores for the end of the week. If any of our players misses the cut, they get a 5-stroke penalty added to your score. And we're just going to see who wins. And this will be a continuing segment heading into Augusta National and the Masters and even further beyond that. So we hope you like this content. And if you have any suggestions for how we can make this segment better, feel free to leave a comment.
All right, so let's go ahead and start it off. Let's just read off who we actually have, who our 5 players are, and then we can go into more detail about why. So Emmy has Patrick Cantley. He did have Scotty Scheffler, but we had to ratify some of our picks due to one of my players officially dropping out of the tournament. But he has Patrick Cantley, Will Zalatoris, Tyrell Hatton, Kevin Kisner, and Max Homa. In my picks, I originally had Victor Hovland, Hideki Matsuyama, Cameron Smith, Billy Horschel, and Taylor Gooch. However, Matsuyama officially dropped today, so I went ahead and exchanged Matsuyama for Matthew Fitzpatrick. So once again, My picks are Victor Hovland, Hideki Matsuyama, Cameron Smith, Billy Horschel, and Taylor Gooch. So those are our picks. So let's go into a little bit more detail as to why we picked the players that we did. You want to start us off?
Yeah, for sure. So with Patrick Cantley, I believe he's third or fourth in the world right now in the world golf ranking. He's taken a few weeks off, so it's not like he was coming in on red hot form or anything. I just wanted to pick him because of his steady play. He's a guy who doesn't make many mistakes out there. He has one of the best putting strokes on tour. And guys who don't make the big numbers and are able to just hang around the lead will always have a chance at TPC Sawgrass and in most tournaments in general.
Okay. Why don't you go through your list?
Let me pull up my list. Sorry.
Okay. Well, while you're doing that, well, I'll let you finish.
Okay, so with Tyrrell Hatton, he has had a lot of scares in terms of being close to winning on the PGA Tour. He's a guy who plays on the European Tour a lot more than the PGA Tour. So he's won a lot over there, but not much over here. But he's a guy who's in contention constantly. He's really solid around the greens, getting up and down, recovering. And he's got this fieriness about him. If you watch him play, you can tell, especially on a Sunday, for example, you can tell that he's got this intense competitiveness about him. Or if you listen to any of his press conferences, his interviews, he's not afraid to say what he thinks, and he's a stand-up dude. As for why I chose him, I felt like coming off a top 25 finish last week at the Arnold Palmer. I think he was in good form to come in this week and have a good showing. Now on to my next pick, Sal Torres. So Sal Torres is a guy who, if you recall, he contended at last year's Masters and the 2021 Masters. He was right there in the final group and played pretty well. That's when he became more of a household name in golf. Since then, he's had his struggles with the putter. He's always been an amazing ball striker. But I know that as long as he putts well, he will always be in contention. He was even just in contention last week as well. And he's been really solid on tour this year overall. If you look at his FedEx Cup standings, he's in the top 25 currently. And I just think if he makes the putts, he'll be right there. From what I watched of the tournament earlier, he actually didn't miss a green until the 13th or 14th hole, which just shows you how good of a ball striker he really is with his irons. And then my next pick, I'll just run through it. My last two were Max Homa and Kevin Kisner. Kevin Kisner is a guy who's had success in this tournament in years past. If you remember, he burst onto the scene in 2018, I think, or maybe it was before that. But I know for a fact it was the year that Ricky won the tournament. He was in that playoff with Ricky when he had that insane run through those final three holes. So he's had success here in years past. He has a go-to shot, which is very important. Playing at TPC Sawgrass, Pete Dye, the designer of this course, he made all of the holes visually intimidating on purpose, to where the players have to be able to commit to a shot shape and be able to execute. And Kevin Kisner is a guy who out of the guys on tour, you know that he's going to play a draw every single time. He's going to have that draw every single time. And that's the shot he can count on. So as long as he is striking the ball well, he's going to be in tournaments because he's going to putt well and he's going to compete his ass off. And then Max Homa, he was my replacement pick instead of Scotty Scheffler. I know Max Homa. I didn't put that much thought into it. We actually made our picks down to the guys who hadn't teed off yet, and that was about 3 or 4 hours ago. So I just looked through the tee times that hadn't gone off yet, and Max Homa was a name that caught my eye. And yeah, that's it.
All right, good picks. And this is our first time really actually diving into this much. So we're going to get better at this as the season goes on. But as for my picks, I'll start at the bottom actually with my sleeper this week. A guy that I've seen play well in the past couple of tournaments that I've had my eye on, that I've watched some of, bits and parts of. I've watched the Genesis, Farmers Insurance. I watched last week the Arnold Palmer. And man, Scotty Scheffler, the guy you did have originally, has been scorching hot with 2 wins in the past three starts. Hook 'em horns, even though I'm kind of saddened by other Hook 'em horns news. But anyways, Taylor Gooch, I think he's a sleeper in this field who's played well lately. He is making just his 3rd start here at TPC Sawgrass at this event. One of those starts in 2019 was a miscut, his first ever start. So I don't worry too much about that because last year he finished top 5 in a loaded field. And I know past performance at the particular course doesn't always indicate how he will do this week. However, I think he's playing well right now. And I think he could at least, surprise some people being in that top 10, top 5 range, the way he's been playing. So that's Taylor Gooch for you. I don't really know too much about him, but he's been playing well lately and he's caught my eye. Let's see, who else do I have? Matthew Fitzpatrick, the guy I picked up today. The reason I like him, he hasn't really won yet. He hasn't broken through, and that's kind of a common thread for some of my picks. However, the reason I do like him, I like him because he's great in the strokes gained approach part of his game, and that's proven to be historically critical at this course. And he seems to perform well on Pete Dye design courses. He hasn't won yet, but I like the way he's been playing. He's a little bit lower on the betting board, around 35-1 odds, but I took him as a flyer. He would, like Max Homa was to you. He caught my eye after, I was scrolling through the players who hadn't teed off yet this afternoon because there was the weather delay, which I do think helped us in that process. Who else do I have? Let's see. Hold on, let me get to my list real fast. Cam Smith, he's a guy I've liked in the past. He's long off the tee. That can come into play given that the course is going to be wet. Ball's not going to roll out as much. He's young. I like his game. Don't really have too much else to say there. I'll be quick with this. Billy Horschel. He's a guy I've heard a lot about, been reading a lot about lately. Has been playing well. Ultimately, we're talking about 4 top 15 finishes in his last 4 starts. Tied 11th at the Farmers, tied 6th, tied 15th, and then tied 2nd last week at the Arnold Palmer. He's playing well right now. And he's kind of, in that middle range as well. I liked him. He's gotten off to a solid start this year. And then my last pick, my top pick, Victor Hovland, 24 years old, really hasn't been able to finish off a big victory yet. However, he's ranked number 3 in the world. Has been playing really well. I believe 3 top 10s in his past 3 top 10s and 1 win so far on the season. Played well at this tournament last year until he made a mistake that ultimately cost him 2 straight penalty. Missed the cut, but he's playing really well, coming in hot. And I think at some point it's going to be his time to break through and win one of these bigger tournaments. So those are my 5 picks: Victor Hovland, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Taylor Gooch, Billy Horschel, and then ultimately Cam Smith.
Right. Yeah, and Victor Hovland was a guy that I actually was going to pick, but you had taken him first, and I was like, oh, dang. And then I had to kind of move along from there. But I think he's had like 4 or 5 top 2 finishes in his last 8 worldwide starts. So over the past
crazy
4 or 5 months, he's been almost unbeatable, the level of golf he's been playing, basically since the Ryder Cup. So look for him in the future in majors and in any tournament this year that he's playing in. He's going to be right up there in terms of betting favorites.
Absolutely. Do you have anything else you want to say about the tournament? Should we update on the leaderboard?
Yeah, I can pull up the leaderboard real quick.
Yeah.
I think
right now, Tommy Fleetwood and Tom Hoagie are tied at 6 under for the lead. There are a bunch of players tied at 5 under and 4 under. I see Sam Burns is up there at 4 under par.
Right. Cameron Smith and Sal Torres are at 3 under. Those are 2 of our guys.
Let's see here.
Terrell Hatton's at 2 under.
That's good.
Yeah, there's actually a few guys up here that I was really close to picking. Joaquin Niemann is one of them who's been playing really well recently. I think he's from Chile. His swing, if you've seen his swing has so much lag, and he drops the club so far to the inside so well. It almost reminds me a little bit of Sergio Garcia, a little bit, but yeah, he's an insanely good ball striker as well. That seems to be the theme here among these guys at the top of the leaderboard. Really elite ball strikers up here at the top. But with that, I think we'll go ahead and move on.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Let's see the checklist for today. All right, let's talk about the news that broke just about 3 or 4 hours ago. The MLB and the MLBPA, after 99 days of a lockout, the second longest work stoppage, I should say, in MLB history. In fact, it doesn't even come close to the players' strike of 94-95 that caused them to miss 234 days and 968 games canceled, including a World Series. So this, in comparison to that, is like nothing, considering we're still going to get a full 162. The season's just going to start a week later. Games will be made up via double headers that have been moved, pushed back due to a little bit later season start. But the MLB and MLBPA have agreed to a tentative CBA agreement that will allow them to lift the lockout and to start the season on April 7th. Once again, a full 162 games. There will be a 12-team playoffs beginning this season. So 2 extra teams are making the playoffs, 1 in each league. The collective bargaining tax, which was a big issue a big hurdle in these negotiations. Again, the players wanted to raise the collective bargaining tax each year of this agreement, while the owners wanted to keep it down. So it could effectively act as like a salary cap. But they ended up actually meeting in the middle on this issue. $230 million this year, and it will grow to $244 million by the end of the agreement. So good there. They met in the middle. Minimum salaries have been raised for minor league players all the way up to $700,000 this year, increasing $20,000 per year. That's huge for the younger players. Make more money right off the bat. The pre-arbitration pool has been expanded to 50 million. The players ultimately wanted about 80 million, but the MLB in their original offer was only at about 25 million. So they sort of met in the middle there. That was good to see. So the common theme here is compromise. It was really a miracle considering that yesterday it was announced that after they couldn't come to an agreement yesterday in a last-ditch effort to save the 162 game season, Manfred ultimately canceled another week of games. So there had been two total weeks of games canceled, and 24 hours later, we have an agreement and a 162 game season. And guess what? It's no longer tentative. The owners have officially ratified the CBA agreement, and a unanimous vote, a 30-0 yes vote. So the lockout has been lifted. There is no lockout anymore, and free agency has begun. Get ready, buckle up. Here we go. Your thoughts?
Well, obviously it's a huge win for baseball. I mean, it's been a while since there's been real buzz around the sport that's been anywhere close to positive. A lot of the stuff of the past few months has been extremely negative, and for good reason, obviously. I mean, there's not really too much to say. It's just other than this is a huge win for the MLB. Like, they needed to figure something out. And like you said, it was against all odds. I didn't think it was going to happen. But when that news came out, it was shocking, to say the least. It was not even on my radar that anything could get done, let alone right away. So, yeah, on to free agency. We have probably moves coming in, maybe even during this stream. We talked about this before the pod or before the stream started. We could have moves go down during this stream. We'll have our phones on standby, obviously, so we can react for y'all. But it's going to get started right away. So make sure y'all stay tuned for that.
A couple more things I want to say. There were some rule changes that are actually implemented in this CBA. First of all, there will be finally, I know a lot of baseball fans have been begging for this, a universal DH. So no more pitchers hitting. Now, of course, if you have a pitcher like Shohei Ohtani that can hit, you can still hit him. But there will be no more National League has to have pitchers hit and American League gets the DH. It is now an even playing field across baseball, and I love it. We want to see more offense and not pitchers hit. No offense to the pitchers. Your job is to pitch, not to hit.
Yeah.
There are a select few, the Jacob deGroms of the world, that are pretty good at it, considering. But we want to see actual hitters hit and not pitchers. Additionally, I mentioned the 12-team expanded postseason. I do not know how exactly that is going to work. All I do know is it's probably going to be the top two records in each, or the top two division winners in each league, American League and National League, will get buys. And then the remaining four teams, based on, I don't know how they'll match up, based on seeding, I guess, will play a best of three sort of wild card series. with the better record getting home field advantage for that. That's what I've heard. I don't know if that's official yet, but that's how I heard that it is going to work out. So we'll get a 12-team playoff instead of the 1-game elimination wild card. We will get a 3-game series to start off the 3-game series to start off the MLB playoffs. Additionally, spring training games will start next week, March 17th. Spring training camps can open as early as tomorrow. Players reporting as early as tomorrow because they got to ramp up. And then lastly, the 7-inning doubleheaders that they have been doing the past couple of years, those have been totally abolished. They're going back to 9-inning game doubleheaders. And the extra inning rule, where there was a runner on second base to start extra innings, has also been ratified. So we're going back to traditional baseball. But there are some good rule changes in here. Additionally, shifts have been banned. And I think a pitch clock has been implemented.
Interesting.
To speed up the game a little bit. So there you go. That's the rule changes that have been implemented as part of the everything else, the economics to this collective bargaining agreement. So yes, we will have free agency signings. I don't think anything has happened quite yet, but expect something soon. And if it happens on this pod, we will react.
Right. That would be chaos.
We will see.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that was actually the first time hearing most of that stuff, actually all of that stuff. My initial reaction to hearing the 3-game series thing for a wild card is, how will that affect bullpens? You know, having those extra 2 games going into a divisional round series, that's going to, I think, seen in years past.
Yeah, we'll see how that all works out. I assume playoffs will probably be expanded a little bit. There will be some extra off days in between series. However, I don't know the full details. I'm sure we'll be talking about this more here very soon. So with that, we have football now to talk about.
Right.
Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I texted you earlier and said, wow, as soon as the MLB gets a little bit of spotlight, Khalil Mack trade. Khalil Mack was acquired by the Los Angeles Chargers, a team that we covered on Monday. Another example of a team we covered on Monday being completely wiping everything we said off of that slate. By the way, we did drop that video today on the Chargers. So if you're a Chargers fan, or if you're just a NFL fan in general, go check out those videos on the AFC West and NFC West. But anyway, wow, this trade, I mean, for the Bears, I'm looking at it like, okay, the idea of trading Khalil Mack, getting off of that money, is a good idea because you're looking to reload, kind of step into the new era with Justin Fields. And I don't think Khalil Mack was realistically going to be a part of that. And having that salary cap flexibility was way more important. But getting back a 2nd-round pick and a 6th-round pick, that seems very low for me. I think they could have easily gotten more back. That's my initial reaction, just gut reaction. Maybe I'll think something different of it. Maybe they have plans to move up in the draft with those picks. But as of right now, I don't know what to think of this move for the Bears. And also, what does this mean for the other veterans they have on that team? Akeem Hicks is waiting on a contract. He's going to be a free agent. Who else? I mean, they have a lot of veterans on that team that are what are they just there now? Like, are they going to trade them? Are they going to look to rebuild? What is this going to turn into? So a lot of questions are yet to be answered for the Bears. And then the Chargers, it's a win. It's 100% a win. Pass rush wasn't one of the things we mentioned in our offseason blueprint, but we did mention star power. That was one of the things we said. If you can go out and get a star, bring in some names, some veteran leadership on either side of the ball, really, to help out this team, help them win games, then it would be a win. And, Khalil Mack is exactly that. He hasn't been very healthy the last few years. He's had his nagging injuries here and there. But if he's healthy, him paired with Joey Bosa on the other side, you've got something there. You're working with something. And you get a couple guys in the draft for that interior D line, and then boom, you're set.
Right. Man, where do I start? From a Chicago Bears perspective, we'll start here. It is clear to me, and you jump in if you think I'm off base on this, but it's clear to me that the Chicago Bears are looking to completely just reset, rebuild this year, and then move forward, rebuild into going into 2023. It looks like to me that they're not going to re-sign Allen Robinson. They're ultimately going to let him test the market. They may be trading some other veterans. That's what I've been hearing on Twitter. And they have now traded Khalil Mack. Now, for Bears fans out there, you do get a second-round pick this year, excuse me. So you have 2 second-round picks this year, and you get a 6th next year, which ultimately I don't think we need to talk about too much. The main focus here should be the second-round pick this year. You do have 2 second-rounders this year. So if the plan is to ultimately, like you said, use those picks to move back up into the first round because you do not have a first rounder, all right, to get a potential impact player that could help you this season, then this trade doesn't look nearly as, I'm not going to say bad,
because head scratching.
Right. That's the correct term. The reason I don't say bad is because we all know Khalil Mack is a great player when he's healthy. But as you said, he has not been healthy. He's on the wrong side of 30, although he's still productive when he's on the field, right? He's on the wrong side of 30, 31 years old. And as you said, he's missed multiple games each of the past 2 seasons. He missed 10 games this year and then some last year as well. Okay. So if the plan, let me put it this way, as long as the Bears have a clear vision in mind for where this trade will ultimately take them in the long term, whether that's trading up in the draft this year to get a real impact player that can help them into jump starting this, I guess, reload or rebuild, or whether it's just, to take it on the chin this year and then rebuild into next year, whatever the plan is, right? You have Justin Fields. Whatever the plan is, as long as they have a long-term vision and aren't just making these moves blindly, which I don't think they would, right? But you never know. Then I'm ultimately fine with that. As long as you have a vision in mind and you're ultimately going somewhere with this, and this isn't just like a move to just get rid of them, and you have no real long-term ramifications in plan for this, I'm fine with it. But right now, it's a little bit head-scratching considering the circumstances. They are going to take on the $24 million cap hit this year, which is not great. And you only get a second rounder this year and a sixth rounder next year. I do think they could have gotten more. It's not great, but as long as they have a plan moving forward, I don't really care. It seems to me the plan is to rebuild this year. Just use this year as a rebuild. From a Chargers perspective, it's great. They get Khalil Mack as long as he can stay healthy. I won't say much more than he's a highly, highly productive player. And he's worth taking the chance on, worth the bargain, considering what he's done on the field when healthy. Tied 7th in run stuffs, according to Next Gen Stats since 2016. Tied 3rd in quarterback pressures and 4th in total sacks since 2016. And now he's being paired with Joey Bosa. The interesting thing is both of them sort of had their own health issues, but if both of them are healthy at the same time and they can add some depth on that interior defensive line, well, then we're really looking at something here with the Chargers. And in that division, they probably realized, okay, Russell Wilson, right? Patrick Mahomes, Derek Carr. We got to be able to get to the quarterback. And that's ultimately why I love this move. And he's also being reunited with Brandon Staley, which I love as well. So, who coached him back in 2018.
Exactly.
So, and he was highly productive that year.
Yeah.
And that year, he was second in the Defensive Player of the Year voting. Of course, finishing second to Aaron Donald. So, I love it for the Chargers. As long as he can stay healthy. And the Bears, it's a little bit head scratching, but as long as they have a vision in mind, I don't really care. Sorry, Bears fans. I'm indifferent.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And the thing that I'm really excited about, and, maybe there would be a little more hype around it if John Gruden was still there, is the whole Raiders angle of this. Like, Khalil Mack is going to be playing the Raiders twice a year now.
Yeah.
And that's the team that traded him, out of the blue. And there's going to be a little bit extra. There's going to be a little bit extra motivation there, I'm sure. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. And with that, we'll get into some of these other moves that happened during the tag deadline. Let's start with the Wentz trade.
Why don't you start? I want to hear your thoughts first.
Yeah, this one was interesting. So they're basically swapping second-round picks and a third next year, I believe. I don't have the trade details right in front of me, so let me know if I'm saying it wrong. But from my understanding, they're swapping second-round picks, and Washington will be giving the Colts a third next year, which could turn into a second-round pick if Carson Wentz stays healthy for the entire year or for the majority of the year. So a little bit like the Colts trade from the Eagles with Carson Wentz, the pick could turn into a second-round pick. From the Commanders' point of view, that's a first-time Commanders name drop on the channel. From their point of view, you were desperate to get a quarterback, and they made that clear. They made that public. They were calling everybody. There was even a report that they called about Patrick Mahomes from the Chiefs, which is crazy to think about, but hey, give it a shot. They were extremely desperate, and they were looking at anything and everything just to get a guy in the building that they can feel confident in and that they hope can get this team to the playoffs. Because we can't forget that the reason why Washington was such a sought-after destination for some of these quarterbacks was because of that team around said quarterback. They still have a very good pass rush, and I think if they work out some of the kinks in that secondary, work some of that out, I think the defense will get right back to the form they were in 2020. So if they can do that, I think this move is a win. And I think ultimately, this move isn't to win Super Bowls. I don't think I think they know that they're not going to win a Super Bowl as they're currently set up, but they just wanted to get a quarterback in the building to help set up this new era of Washington football. New team name, new organizational philosophy, so to speak, hopefully, at least, and a new era.
Right. So excuse me if I'm checking my phone, just making sure nothing crazy happens, because with how the past 72 hours has gone, you never know. Commander's perspective. I ultimately, in the big picture, agree with you. They entered the offseason like a couple other teams, including mine, desperate for a quarterback, right? And they made it public, as you said. Ron Rivera actually spoke openly at the NFL Combine about how they were calling every team, including the Chiefs, as you said, to try and find the quarterback. I'm sure they called the Packers, every team. So they were calling everyone, except maybe the Steelers. I don't know who they would, whatever. Going in, maybe they wanted Haskins back. Who knows? We will, never mind. So last offseason, let's refresh our memory. They signed Ryan Fitzpatrick as kind of a bridge guy, 1 year, $10 million. He got hurt the first game of the season. That was a long time ago. So they ultimately moved on to Taylor Heineke. And guess what? He kept them viable. I mean, they weren't terrible. They won 7 games, 7-10. But yeah, anytime you're in quarterback purgatory for so long, you ultimately just want to get a guy that you know can be competent, a competent franchise quarterback, be in the upper echelon, the upper half of the league, above average when he's at his best, and can raise your ceiling a bit when he's at his fullest potential. And that's what they did here. I don't necessarily love it, considering some of the erraticacies that we've seen in Carson Wentz's game over the past couple of years that have still yet to be completely, I guess, I don't think they'll ever be. His flaws have continued to show up on film, basically, but the accuracy at some points in times has been erratic. His decision making, making some head scratching decisions at times. But at the end of the day, he's been very productive. He was very productive last season, 7 yards per attempt, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, completed 64% of his passes. It was just the last couple games. In fact, the last game in particular that put the nail in the coffin here for the Indianapolis Colts, that game against the Jaguars, that I think really pissed off the owner, Chris Ballard, or the GM, Chris Ballard, and Frank Reich. And the Colts now are left without a succession plan. But I do think they're going to be in the running for maybe a Jimmy Garoppolo. I've heard rumors about maybe a Mitchell Trubisky as a bridge guy. I don't know. It is concerning that they're now moving on to their 6th different quarterback in 6 years. I'll have to pull up the tweet with the different quarterbacks. It's been like Scott Tolzien, Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, and now whoever they are to get next. For Washington, I do think it raises their ceiling if Carson Wentz stays healthy. I do think they now have the second best quarterback in the division. And I think with that defense, the way that defense can play at times, and with Terry McLaurin, you can make the argument is better than any receiver that the Colts had last year. He's very underrated, in my opinion. Now that he's playing with a guy with a big arm, they can get a couple more weapons in here. I like the running back Antonio Gibson. They are taking on his full salary, $28.3 million for this season. But guess what? I mean, if you want to get a competent quarterback in this league, a franchise type guy, it's not going to come cheap at the end of the day. Like, let's just get that out of the way, right? So I don't know. Like you said, I don't think they're winning Super Bowls with this, but it is a guy who's been productive when he's been healthy. If he can eradicate some of his flaws that continue to show up on film, if Washington adds some weapons in free agency, this could be an interesting wild card-ish contender come next January. And for the Colts, you lose this trade in the short term, but as you said, you do get some draft capital back. This has been an organization that has consistently drafted well on a consistent basis the past couple of years. They have good front office, good ownership, a good coach. I think they're just desperate to win. And I think I won't be surprised if they make a move to get the next guy here pretty soon because they seem to be a pretty aggressive team in that respect. So in the short term, I think Washington wins, but we'll have to see how Wentz performs. And I'm really interested to see what Indianapolis does moving forward.
Yeah. Let me address the Indianapolis side a little bit more. Well, the thing is, when you mention a Jimmy Garoppolo, when you mention a Mitchell Trubisky, a Teddy Bridgewater, the thing about the AFC is if you're going to be competing to get to the Super Bowl, you've got to get the quarterback right. Like you can't have a okay quarterback. You can't have a middle of the road quarterback, a bad quarterback. You got to get it right. And with all of the quarterbacks in the AFC, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, all of them. I mean, Josh Allen, you name it. You got to get the quarterback right. And, the Colts have shown that they're extremely aggressive. And I'm going to put it out there right now. I think if they call up the Raiders and are like, how much picks do you want for Derek Carr? How many picks do you want for Derek Carr? I mean, I think the Colts are going to be that team that they're just going to throw all the picks to the wind, especially with the example of the Rams from this past year. They're going to be extremely aggressive. And I think it was the right move. It will be disappointing if they end up with a guy like Teddy Bridgewater or Jimmy Garoppolo, who's like on a lesser tier. But if they do end up hitting on a Derek Carr, if they do end up hitting on a Deshaun Watson or a guy of that caliber, then this all becomes worth it and they're Super Bowl contenders immediately. Absolutely.
So with that, can we move on to the next trade?
Yep, exactly. Let's do it.
Okay.
So this next trade really just blew my mind. So let me run y'all through a timeline real quick. So I go to class that morning on, I think it was Tuesday morning, and my professor is a Broncos fan, and he mentioned, he was like, "Oh, you guys want to hear the worst news of my morning? Just ruined my day. Aaron Rodgers is going to stay with the Packers. Just terrible. I'm so mad right now." He was just, he wasn't happy. And then I leave class, an hour or so goes by, and this happens. The Russell Wilson trade. Russell Wilson gets traded to the Denver Broncos. The Broncos give up a lot. They gave up a lot. 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, I believe. Noah Fant as well. Let me get the actual details in front of me so I don't mess this up. I have it in my notes right here.
Yeah, so it's um, so the Broncos are giving Seattle Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, a 2022 first round pick, which is the ninth pick in this year's upcoming draft, a 2023 first round pick next year, a 2022 second round pick, and a 2022 fourth round pick, and a 2023 second round pick. Wait a minute. Yeah, I think that's it. And then the Broncos acquire Russell Wilson, and I believe it's a fourth round pick. So
yeah, so
a massive haul for Seattle, a massive haul. Look, we talked about the Broncos on Tuesday. We said they needed to acquire. The priority should be ultimately resolving the quarterback conundrum that has plagued them for years since Peyton Manning ultimately retired. And they finally did it. And I applaud them. Kudos to the Broncos, George Patton, John Lynch, everybody in that contingency on having a contingency plan in place to land their next franchise quarterback after hearing about Aaron Rodgers ultimately staying in Green Bay. They had connections there with Nathaniel Hackett being hired as head coach. We've heard the rumors all along, ever since this thing started. But kudos, shifting their focus immediately and having a deal ready to go. And they just said, okay, we're basically a quarterback away from, as Colin Cowherd puts it, being in the Super Bowl bubble, right? If they can re-sign some of their important free agents, we're a franchise quarterback away from being in the Super Bowl bubble. And Russell Wilson definitely puts them there. This is a good roster. I don't worry too much about them giving away the picks. If you can acquire Russell Wilson, a guy who's still in the prime of his career, only at age 33, probably has at least 5 prime years left. The way he takes care of his body, maybe more. Get him in the building. He's a leader, good locker room guy. You don't have to worry about anything off the field. Get him in the building. You do what it is you have to do to get him in the building. Last year was sort of a freak injury. He's going to be coming back healthy. He played well at the end of last season in Seattle when he really looked like the real Russell Wilson. He doesn't have a huge cap hit that you would think a guy like Russell Wilson has. Let me get the numbers on this. Yeah, it's only $24 million this year and then $27 million next year. I mean, that's a bargain for a guy like Russell Wilson, age 33, in his prime. He's a force multiplier. I think he's going to make everyone better. And the Broncos are in the Super Bowl bubble immediately, in my opinion. But they do have to go through that gauntlet of a division. So why don't you give your thoughts on the Broncos perspective, and then we can talk about Seattle. I need to respond to this text real fast.
I mean, yeah, you just said it. I mean, there's not much you can really say other than they finally did it. I mean, it's been years and years of them just being in the purgatory of the NFL, the bubble of the NFL, whatever you want to call it, just mediocrity because of the quarterback position. And now with Russell Wilson, you can look to the draft and to free agency. I think you still have about $20 million in cap space. You can re-sign some of your guys, some of the guys we talked about in our Broncos preview, Josie Jewell and that other linebacker, I can't think of his name. All those guys that we had discussed. You bring a couple of those guys back, get another draft, have another good draft, maybe. Obviously you'll have like a 3rd round pick now that you've traded all these picks away, but you can still find value late in the draft, and they've shown before that they have found value. And yeah, you just look to compete in this division. You have to be able to have a good quarterback to have any chance in that division in the AFC West. And I can't wait to see the response these other AFC West teams have. We're already seeing some of the response. It's with the Khalil Mack trade. I mean, it may not be a direct response to the Russell Wilson trade, but that may have had something to do with it for sure. You got to be able to rush the passer when you have three good to elite quarterbacks in your division.
Right. Yeah, they really needed that guy, and they got him. So kudos to the Denver Broncos. We'll be talking more about this as the offseason progresses. But in terms of Seattle, at first I didn't really love it as the details were coming through. I mean, Drew Lock, not necessarily a guy that maybe they see something in him, but not necessarily a guy you want starting at quarterback, especially in that division where you got guys like Kyler Murray and Matthew Stafford, and ultimately maybe Trey Lance or someone big in San Francisco. I do like the George Fant part. That's a positive.
Noah Fant. Sorry. Yeah. You're good.
They have an offensive lineman, I think, whose name is George Fant. I think that's why I got it confused. But anyway, I really like him. He's young, big frame, can stretch the field. I like him. George Fant or Noah Fant. Why do I keep saying George?
You're good, man. That's tough.
Shelby Harris, he's a productive player. He'll be a depth piece. I mean, and you get all these draft picks. The thing that I scratch my head though is just like, okay, you have Pete Carroll, who's in his 70s, still youthful for a 71-year-old, 72-year-old. He's a defensive coach. Hasn't really crushed on any of his offensive coordinator hires. And now, the heart and soul of the Seattle teams of past is gone. Bobby Wagner was ultimately released, I believe, on that same day, later that night on Tuesday. He's now a free agent. I've heard rumors they're looking to go ahead and move off Tyler Lockett, maybe some other guys as well. So it seems to me that this is just going to be a full-on retool, rebuild for the Seattle Seahawks. And I guess, saw this coming for a while as the play of the Seattle Seahawks overall, especially on the defensive side of the ball, has been in decline ever since they made it to that last Super Bowl. You look at the numbers, it's gotten progressively worse year to year. However, I don't know. The Seattle, unlike Indianapolis and some of these other organizations, haven't really been great at hitting on draft picks over the past decade. It hasn't been great. I mean, you have the occasional DK Metcalf, even the punter Michael Dixon was a good pick, but other than that, it's been spotty in places. So ultimately, I think you do free up some cap space, I believe. So maybe they can. And look, if the plan is to use all this draft capital to go out and maybe swing big on a guy like Deshaun Watson, well, then we're talking about something totally different than what we're talking about right now. We're singing a different tune. But until I see that, it's kind of a rebuild, total rebuild, commit to this now type thing for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah. You mentioned exactly what I was going to mention. The whole theory where Pete Carroll is going to go into this massive rebuild, it's just, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. You mentioned it as well. I mean, the guy he's the oldest head coach in the NFL. Obviously he looks great for being in his 70s or whatever the case may be. But the reality is, I don't think going through a rebuild with him is the right move. You might, if you want to have a rebuild, you might need to move off of Pete Carroll. And that might be the next pick to the next domino to fall. Who knows? But I do think the thought of Deshaun Watson is very interesting. That's a thought that actually popped into my head. And that's something that I was going to ask you is, if they turn this into Deshaun Watson, that would be crazy, first of all. But man, I can see it. I can definitely see it happening. I mean, it depends on how much Houston wants for Deshaun, and obviously all that stuff with his legal situation and all that. But there's a lot there. But if that doesn't happen, I actually see a lot of parallels with what's going on with the Portland Trailblazers right now. Two Pacific Northwest teams moving around some stars and looking to retool. I don't think it's going to be a full rebuild. I think they're going to keep some of their core guys. They're going to keep Metcalf. They're going to keep maybe Jamal Adams. They might keep actually, they might not keep Jamal Adams. He hasn't been that good for them. But they might keep some guys here and there just to keep some talent in the building and be competitive. So I don't see a full-on tankathon as long as Pete Carroll is there. I think they'll win 5 or 6 games the next couple of years, and then a couple drafts into the future, they'll look to be right back, hopefully in playoff contention.
Yeah. If this, as you said, if this turns into Deshaun Watson, well, then we're singing a different tune, right? They do have holes they need to fill at various positions. We talked about that. Go back and listen to our Seahawks portion of the episode that was recorded on Monday. So it wouldn't be like insert Deshaun Watson and you're ultimately like going to win the Super Bowl type thing, right? But it would ultimately vault them back into, okay, you can make the playoffs discussion. Because right now it's not ultimately looking like they're going to be one of those teams, especially in this division where you have the Rams, who are probably going to be right back with a loaded roster, and Matthew Stafford. Cardinals, as long as they can get this Kyler Murray situation figured out and have a good draft, maybe bring in a couple pieces here and there on that offense, you're looking at a good team in the Cardinals. And then the Niners. We saw them get all the way to the NFC Championship game last year, come close to even making the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. And if Trey Lance ends up being that guy that some people think he could be, including myself, actually, now that I've thought about it more and watched some of his tape from the games he played this year, which was a small sample size, but nevertheless, it's a rough go in that division. I mean, we're talking about the AFC West and then the NFC West. They're right there in terms of toughest divisions in the NFL. So I don't know. Right. We'll see what happens with the Seahawks. We'll see what happens. But I do agree with your premise that I don't necessarily think Pete Carroll is the guy you want to embark on a rebuild with as your head coach. I do agree with that. I don't think that fits his timeline.
Right. But it's also extremely late to be looking for a head coach. So,
right.
I think they're moving on with Pete Carroll for this year. Maybe we might see them move off during the season next year or after the season next year. But whatever the case may be, we're going to see big changes in Seattle moving forward. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on with the NFL? Obviously,
I want to touch on the Aaron Rodgers decision real fast.
Oh, right, exactly.
General reactions to that. What were your thoughts?
Well, I didn't think the chaos would ensue right afterwards that we ended up with. But I saw it coming. A lot of the sources that I looked to for NFL content were right there thinking he would go back to Green Bay. I just thought it was 3 options: Green Bay, Denver, or retire. I don't think Washington was all that plausible. I just couldn't imagine him ending up in an organization like Washington with all their problems as an organization. I don't think he would like that very much. And yeah, I saw this coming a little bit. Obviously, we're yet to see what the Packers can do in terms of bringing some of these guys back to run it back. But I like that they brought back Davante Adams. It's interesting because the franchise tag is either the positional average for your position, or 2 times what you made the year before. So 2 times what Davante Adams made last year is about 25 million or 22 million or so. So he's going to be making good money this year. I'm sure he's not too mad about that. But that does bring up the question, how are they going to bring back some of these other guys? Because now you're looking at negative 40 million cap space. Now you're entering New Orleans Saints territory where you might have to completely retool and not be able to bring back your free agents.
I ultimately wasn't too surprised. I mean, obviously there had been the rumblings of Denver, maybe Pittsburgh, maybe even Tennessee. But if you look at it, there were drawbacks, I think, to each situation that he could have decided to ultimately move on to. Denver, even though seems to be ultra competitive and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league and they have a good roster, you still going from the NFC North, which should be an easy win for the Packers, to one of the tougher divisions in all of football with Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, and Derek Carr. That's one drawback to going to Denver. It's going to be harder to win in the AFC than it is in the NFC right now with the landscape. Pittsburgh, they're rebuilding their offensive line. They kind of have a team in transition. There are some holes to fill on that defense. We don't know if guys like Tua and Alualu are coming back. The middle linebacker position ultimately needs to be filled in. There are some holes there. They have talent, right? Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Najee Harris. They might bring back Juju. I don't know. Pat Freiermuth, of course, is a guy I'm really excited about. But there were major drawbacks there with the rebuilding offensive line in particular. And, you're playing in another tough division. Lamar Jackson will probably be healthy. Joe Burrow, the Browns, they can figure their crap out. We'll see. And then the Titans. I guess it would have been, I don't know. The Titans, I really have no thoughts on. I didn't see that happening anyways. So staying in Green Bay, you get Davante Adams back. Hopefully they can work out a long-term deal with him as well. You have basically everything, right? You need. If you add a piece here and there, figure out a way to move some contracts around. They may not lose Zadarius Smith. We'll see what happens with that. But they can get a couple more pieces on the perimeter of this offense. Maybe help Aaron Rodgers just a little bit more. A young head coach like Matt LaFleur, innovative on the offensive side of football. With this division, the way that it's set up, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to get back to the NFC Championship game, barring any sort of major injuries, and maybe finally get back to a Super Bowl.
Right.
I was not surprised at all.
Right.
He tweeted that he hadn't officially signed the contract and that the reported numbers weren't accurate, but I don't know what that actually is now. I don't know if that's been released yet, but whatever it is, he's Aaron Rodgers, 2-time reigning MVP. His production on the field, we can talk a lot about the playoffs, but his production on the field has been elite year after year after year, and he's been your guy. So you ultimately got to pay him.
Right. I don't really. And one thing I want to say about this Zadarius Smith situation is the thing that people are forgetting is the fact that Rashawn Gary is a superstar rusher or the passer. His name value isn't quite up there with, the big names that we hear, the Nick Bosa's of the world, the TJ Watts, but Rashawn Gary is absolutely up there in terms of pass rushers. So I think you put Rashawn Gary in that role next year if you don't get Darius Smith back, and maybe you get a guy in the draft, maybe a Jermaine Johnson, somebody like that, and then boom, Rashawn Gary will just pick up right where he left off last year.
That is a positive. I've totally forgot about that aspect of it. He was the guy that came on late last year and really started to produce at a pretty high level.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, I think he's in a good situation. Finish your career where you started and try to ultimately get back to a Super Bowl and deliver another ring to the Green Bay fan base.
Right. And one more thing. I actually think the more important guy to bring back will actually be Quandary Campbell, the middle linebacker that they picked up last year, who completely broke out and turned into an all-pro player in that Green Bay system. So if they can somehow get him back, that would be massive for that defense, because he missed 2 or 3 games last year, and all of those games that he missed, you could see the difference that he made, that he would have made if he had been there. So they need him back.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. Anything else we need to touch on? Let's just real fast touch on the franchise tag stuff.
Right.
We can run through it. Yeah.
Just off the top of my head, Chris Godwin was franchise tagged. I believe Dalton Schultz got the franchise tag. That was interesting. I think David Njoku got the franchise tag as well. Who else?
The guy that we talked about, Orlando Brown for the Chiefs.
Right.
Got franchise tag. Let me think. Did you say did Dalton Schultz get franchise tag?
Yes, he did end up getting franchise tag.
Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
Trying to think.
I mean, most of the guys that got franchise tags are deserving. The one thing that I was a little bit curious about was the plan for the Cowboys in terms of keeping some of these weapons on offense. Obviously, we're looking to move off of Mark Cooper right now, but are we bringing back Michael Gallup? Rather, are we bringing back Cedric Wilson? That's the kind of things that are on my mind right now as a Cowboys fan. And also all this money that we have strapped up into our offensive line, are we going to be looking to move that around at all? Because obviously Zach Martin is here to stay, but Lyle Collins, for a lot of last year, he was a backup because he had the suspension for the first 6 games. Terrence Steele stepped in for him at right tackle and, in my opinion, played better than Lyle Collins did when he returned. So we could look to move off of Lyle Collins maybe. There's teams out there that are looking for tackle. So that could be an option.
Yeah. It's going to be a whole lot of fun these next 2-3 weeks leading up to the draft. With everything that's going to – more quarterback movement is to come. I know that for sure. Of course, all the other free agents will be moving around. Baseball is suddenly back in the picture. NBA playoffs, NBA play-in will be soon. And sort of put on the back burner today by all this news has been the conference tournaments that are going on and the Selection Sunday that is to come on Sunday afternoon once all the conference tournaments wrap up and we get the bracket. So outlook for upcoming content, we're going to have our official episode 100 probably sometime on Saturday. So be on the lookout for that. I will be with Noah Dennis. It'll be a lot of NBA. I'm not going to reveal too much. And then early next week, we'll be doing our March Madness episode. And then we'll continue with all of our March Madness and football off-season coverage until we get to the NBA playoffs. And there will be some golf and baseball mixed in, I'm sure. So there you go.
Right. And we'll continue to pump out content for you guys. One thing that I will say before we wrap up is some news that I saw the other day. I saw that ESPN is going to launch women's fantasy basketball or WNBA fantasy basketball. I'm not sure what they're going to name it because that doesn't really have a nice ring to it. I hope they give it an acronym or something. But I think I'll definitely be participating in that just so I can learn more about the league and get into it a little bit more. We had talked about covering the WNBA last year, but this year will be this year I won't be at a camp for the entire summer, so that'll help, and we're looking to cover that a bit more. So stay tuned for all of that. We've got great stuff planned in the coming months, and I'll leave the official sign off to you, Michael, as always.
Yeah, so it's been a crazy 72 hours in the world of sports. But as we saw today, just like Texas' run in the Big 12 tournament after winning it last year, and just like the MLB lockout after 99 total days, we are going, gone.